James and the Giant Peach by Roald Dahl. 1. Here is James Henry Trotter when he was about 4 years old. Up until this time, he had had a happy life, living peacefully with his mother and father in a beautiful house beside the sea. There were always plenty of other children for him to play with. And there was the sandy beach for him to learn about on, and the ocean to paddle in. It was the perfect life for a small boy. Then one day, James' mother and father went to London to do some shopping, and there a terrible thing happened. Both of them suddenly got eaten up in full daylight, mind you, and on a crowded street by an enormous energy rhinoceros which had escaped from the London Zoo. Now this, as you can well imagine, was a rather nasty experience for two such gentle parents, but in the long run it was far nastier for James than it was for them. Their troubles all over in a jiffy. They were dead and gone in 35 seconds flat. Poor James, on the other hand, was still very much alive, and all around he found himself alone and frightened in a vast, unfriendly world. The lovely house by the seaside had to be sold immediately, and the little boy, carrying nothing but a small suitcase containing a pair of pajamas and a toothbrush, was sent away to live with his two aunts. The names were Aunt Spongy and Aunt Spiker, and I am sorry to say that they were both really horrible people. They were selfish and lazy and cold, and right from the beginning they started beating poor James for almost no reason at all. They never called him by his real name, but always referred to him as "you disgusting little beast," or "you filthy nuisance," or "you miserable creature." And they certainly never gave him any toys to play with or any picture books to look at. His room was as bare as a prison cell. They lived Aunt Sponge, Aunt Spiker, now James as well, in a cool ramshackle house on the top of a high hill in the south of England. The hill was so high that from almost anywhere in the garden James could look down and see for miles and miles across the marvelous landscape of woods and fields, and after a very clear day, if he looked in the right direction, he could see a tiny grey not far away on the horizon, which was the house that he used to live with his beloved mother and father. And just beyond that, he could see the ocean itself, a long thin streak of black sea blue, like a line of ink, beneath the rim of the sky. But James was never allowed to go down off the top of that hill. Neither Aunt Spongy nor Aunt Spiker could ever be bothered to take him out herself, not even for a small walk or a picnic, and he certainly wasn't permitted to go alone. The nasty little beast will only get into mischief if he goes out of the garden. Aunt Spiker had said, and terrible punishment was promised him, such as being locked up in the cellar with the rats for a week if he even so much as dared to climb over the fence. The garden, which covered the whole of top of the hill, was large and desolate, and the only tree in the entire place, apart from a clump of dirty old laurel bush at the far end, was an ancient peach tree that never gave any peaches. There was no swing, no seesaw, no sand pit, and no other children were ever invited to come up the hill to play with poor James. There wasn't so much as a dog or cat around to keep him company, and as time went on, he became sadder and sadder, and more lonely. He used to spend hours there every day, standing at the bottom of the garden, gazing wistfully at the lovely but forbidden wall of woods, fields, and ocean that was spread out below him like a magic carpet. Before reading next chapter, I'm going to talk about what I read before. I read the chapter 1, the beginning of the story about James. James lived with his parents in the house on New Year's Eve. He lived happily, but when he and his parents went to London, his parents passed away. So and he left alone. And his house was sold, and then he was raised by two aunts, Spiker. I don't remember the other aunt's name, Spiker. Anyway, they were horrible, and they didn't treat James properly, and they lived on the hillside, and James had no friends to play with. And outside there was a garden, but desolate garden. It's not a garden full of flowers. And only the giant peach tree stood in the middle of the garden. That was story in chapter 1. I'm going to read chapter 2. Here is James Arnold Trotter after he had been living with his aunts for 3 whole years, which is when this story really begins. For now there came a morning when something rather peculiar happened to him, and this thing, which as I say was only rather peculiar, soon caused a second thing to happen which was very peculiar, and then the very peculiar thing in its own turn caused a really fantastically peculiar thing to occur. It all started on a blazing hot day in the middle of summer. Aunt Spongy, Aunt Spiker, and James were all out in the garden. James had been put to work, as usual. This time he was chopping wood for the kitchen stove. Aunt Spongy and Spiker were sitting comfortably in the deck chairs nearby, sipping tall glasses of Fiji lemonade and watching him to see. He didn't stop work for one moment. Aunt Spongy was enormously fat and very short, and she had small piggy eyes, a sunken mouth, and one of those white, flabby faces that looked exactly as though it had been boiled. She was like a great white soggy or boiled cabbage. Aunt Spiker's, on the other hand, was lean and tall and bunny, and she wore still rimmed spectacles that fixed on to the end of her nose with a clip. She had a screeching voice and long, wet, narrow lips, and whenever she got angry or excited, little cracks of speech would come shooting out of her mouth as she talked. And there they sat, the two ghastly hags, sipping their drinks, and every now and again screaming at James to chop faster and faster. They also talked about themselves, each one saying how beautiful she thought she was. Aunt Sponge had a long handled mirror on her lap, and she kept picking up and gazing at her own hideous face. Elegant smell, Aunt Sponge declared, as lovely as a rose. Just feast your eyes upon my face, observe my shapely nose, beyond my heavenly silky locks. And if I take off both my socks, you'll see my dainty toes. But don't forget, Aunt Spike cried, how much your tummy shows. And Sponge went later, And Spike said, "My sweet, you cannot swing. Behold my gorgeous curvy shape and my teeth and my charming grin. Oh, beauteous me, how I adore my dirty looks, and please ignores that pimple on my chin, my dear old trout." And Sponge cried out, "You're only bones and skin. Such loveliness as I possess can only truly shine in Hollywood." And Sponge declared, "Oh, wouldn't that be fine? I'd capture all the nation's hearts. They give me all the leading parts. The stars would all design. I think you'd make," Spike said, "a lovely Frankenstein." For James' words, still slaving away at the chopping block, the heat was terrible. He was sweating all over, his arm was aching. The chopper was a large, blunt thing far too heavy for a small boy to use. And as he walked, James began thinking about all the other children in the world and what they might be doing at this moment. Some would be loitering to recycle in their garden. Some would be walking cools and picking bunch of the wildflower. And all the little friends whom he used to know would be down by the seaside, playing in the wet sand and splashing around in the water. Great tears began oozing out of James's eyes and rolling down his cheeks. He stopped working and leaned against the chopping blocks, overwhelmed by his own unhappiness. "What's the matter with you?" Aunt Spiker screeched, glaring at him through the top of her steel spectacle. James began to cry. "Stop that immediately and get on to your work, you nasty little beast," Aunt Sponge ordered. "Oh, Auntie Spongy," James cried out. "Auntie Sparkles, couldn't we all three just for once go down to see outside us on the boats? By far night so hot and awful lonely. You lazy good for nothing brute!" Aunt Spike shouted. "Beat him!" cried Aunt Spongy. "I certainly will!" Aunt Spike snapped and she glared at James. James looked back at her and with large frightened eyes. "I shall beat you later on this in the days when I don't feel so hot," she said. "And now get out of my sight, you disgusting little worm, and give me some fish." James turned and ran. He ran up as fast as he could to the far end of the garden and hid himself behind that clump of dirty old rose bush we mentioned earlier on. Then he covered his face with his hands and began to cry and cry. In listening, step 2, repetition. The point how to figure out and the leaders leading or leaders are leading. That is the kind of mirror effect. And learners, if learners have learners use same sentence or similar sentence, they can comprehend easier than before. So the compromise is very important. Learners listen to a lot, and again, learners express themselves a lot as much as they listen to audiobooks. By doing that, and learners can match unconsciously to sentence. It's literally at the moment in a second and learners can figure out what the leaders are leading, and our brain function is very fast in comprehension. The point is to comprehend what leaders are leading, and learners should express many sentences in speaking or writing. Like me, this is one practice I talk about, and then how to listen and listening to audiobook. That is my practice, my express in language. Beyond pronunciation or some speaking skills, expression is also very, very important. Talking about chapter 3. When James was crying, he heard someone coming, and then he turned back. There was an old man who had a beard, black beard, and then he was not tall. And he told James, and then he got something to give him, and he came close James, and then he whispered, "A strange man." So the story is going on. Chapter 4. James Henry Trotter stood there, clutching the bag and staring at the old man. And now the old man said, "All you've got to do is this. Take a large jug of water and pour all the little green things into it. Then, very slowly, one by one, add 10 hairs from your own head. Then set them off. It gets them going. In a couple of minutes, the water will begin to froth and bubble furiously. As soon as that happens, you must quickly bring it all down, the whole jugful, in one gulp, and then, my dear, you'll feel it churning and boiling in your stomach, and steam starts coming out of your mouth immediately after that. Marvelous things will start happening to you, fabulous, unbelievable things, and you will never be miserable again in your life, because you are miserable, aren't you? You needn't tell me. I know all about it. Now off you go, and do exactly as I say, and don't whisper a word of this to those who horrible answer yours. Not a word, and don't let those green things in there get away from you either, because if they do escape, then they will be working neither magic upon somebody else instead of upon you. And that isn't what you want at all, is it, my dear? Whoever they meet first, with bird, insect, animal, or tree, that'll be the one who gets the full power of their magic. So hold the bag tight. Don't tear the paper. Off you go. Hurry up. Don't wait. Now's the time, hurry. With that, the old man turned away and disappeared into the bushes. Chapter 5. The next moment, James was running back toward the house as fast as he could go. He would do it all in the kitchen, he told himself. If only he could get in there without Aunt Spongy and Aunt Spiker seeing him. He was terribly excited. He flew through the long grass and the stinging nettles, not caring whether he got stung or not on his bare knees. And in the distance he could see Aunt Spongy and Aunt Spiker sitting in the chair with ears back toward him. He swerved away and from them so as to go around the other side of the house, but then suddenly, just as he was passing underneath the old peach tree that stood in the middle of the garden, His foot slipped, and he fell flat on his face in the glass. The paper bag burst open as it hit the ground, and the thousands of tiny green things were scattered in all directions. James Middleton picked himself up onto his hands and knees and started searching around for the precious treasures. So what was this? They were all sinking into the soil. He could actually see them, wriggling and twisting as they burrowed their way downward into the hard earth. And at once he reached out a hand to pick some of them up before it was too late, but they disappeared right under his finger. He went after some others, and the same thing happened. He began scrabbling around frantically in an effort to catch hold of those that were left, but they were too quick for him. Each time the tips of his fingers were just about to touch them, they vanished into the earth, and soon, in the space of only a few seconds, every single one of them had gone. James felt like crying. He'd never get them back now. They were lost forever. But where had they gone to? And why in the world had they been so eager to push down in the earth like that? What were they after? There was nothing down there, nothing except the roots of the old peach tree and a whole lot of earthworms and centipedes and insects living in the soil. Or was it that the old man had said, whoever they meet first, be it bird, insect, animal, or tree, that'll be the ones who gets the full power of their magic? Good heavens, thought James. What is going to happen in that case if they do meet an earthworm, or a centipede, or a spider? And what if they do go into the roots of the peach tree? Get up at once, you lazy little beast, a voice was suddenly shouting in James' ear. James glanced up and saw Aunt Spiker standing over him, grim and tall and bony, glaring at him through her steel-limbed spectacle. Get back over there immediately and finish chopping up those logs, she ordered, and Aunt Sponge's fat and fluffy as a jellyfish came waddling up and behind her sister to see what was going on. Why don't we just lower the boy down the well in a bucket and leave him there for the night? She suggested. Get out, teaching him not to lay around like this and the whole day long. That's a very good fish, my dear Sponge. But let's make him finish the chopping of the wood first. Be up to you at once, you hideous brat. Do some work. Slowly, Sally, for James got up off the ground and went back to the wood fire. Or if only he hadn't slipped and fallen and dropped in that precious bag, all hope was happier left and had gone completely now, today and tomorrow and the next day, and all the other days as well, would be nothing but punishment and pain, unhappiness and despair. He picked up the chopper and was just about to start chopping away still again when he heard a shout behind him that made him stop and turn. I listened 2 times, chapter 4 and 5, and the old man gave James a bag in which there was jewels like small ones. So when James learned, and he sold it around a giant peach tree. That's the story. Yeah, so quite difference between text and sound. I tried to listen to 2 times, but 4 times distraction. But could listen a little, can't figure out, and the old man gave the bag to James and disappeared. And then James went on to the garden, and after soil
the jaw or something, and two ants yelled at James to finish wood cutting logs. Okay, here you go. I'm going to read the fix why dog is barking, playing. Sponge, come here at once and look at this. What? It's a peach. And Spike was shouting. What? A peach? Right up there is on the highest branch. Can't you see it? I think you must be mistaken, my dear Spiker. That miserable tree never had any peaches on it. There's a one on now, Spongy. You look for yourself. You're teasing me, Spiker. You are making my mouth to water on purpose when there's nothing to put into it. Why, that tree never even had a blossom on it, let alone a peach. Right up on the highest branch, you say. I can't see a thing very funny. Good gracious me. But I'll be blowed. There really is a peach up there. A nice big one, too, Aunt Spiker said. A beauty, Aunt Sponge cried out. At this point, James slowly put down his chopper and turned and looked across at the two women who were standing underneath the peach tree. Something is about to happen, he told himself. Something peculiar is about to happen any moment. He hadn't the faintest idea what it might be, but he could feel it in his bones that something was going to happen soon. He could feel it in the air around him, in the sudden stillness that had fallen upon the garden. James tiptoed a little closer to the tree. The ants were not talking now. They were just standing there, staring at the peach. There was not a sound anywhere, not even a breath of wind. And overhead, the sun blazed down upon them out of the deep blue sky. It looks alive to me, Aunt Spiker said, breaking the silence. Then why don't we eat it? Aunt Sponge suggested, licking her thick lips. We can have half each. Hey, you, James, come over here at once and climb this tree. James came running over. I want you to pick that peach up there on the highest branch. And Spongy went on. Can you see it? Yeah, asked Spongy. I can see it. And don't you dare to eat any of it yourself. Your Aunt Spiker and I are going to have it between us right here and now. Half each. Get on with it. Up you go. James crossed over the tree trunk and stopped. Aunt Spiker said quickly, hold everything. She was staring up into the branches with her mouth wide open and her eyes bulging as though she had seen a ghost. Look, she said. Look, Spongy, look. What's the matter with you? Aunt Spongy demanded. It's growing, Aunt Spike cried. It's getting bigger and bigger. What's it? The peach, of course. You're joking? Well, look for yourself. But, my dear Spiker, that's perfectly ridiculous. That's impossible. That's so. Wait just a minute. No. Can't be right. No, yet. Grayscale. The thing really is growing. It's nearly twice as big already. Aunt Spiker shouted. It can't be true. It is true. It must be a miracle. Watch it. I'm watching it. Great heavens alive. Aunt Spiker yelled. I can actually see the thing bulging, swelling before my very eyes. This chapter 6 is very clear about the peach on tree, and talking about, and also the activities on. So this story, like activity, is more comprehensive than
Chapter 6. Something happened. Sponge found a fish on the tree. It was rare, so and Spiker didn't believe her. But when she came to the tree, she could see the fish on the tree. It was amazing because the tree had never bloomed a flower on it. So Anne, Sponge, and called James. And they had James pick up the fish. So James climbed up the tree, and then he tried to fill up. At the moment, the fish got grow. He became 2 times. So here we go. What happened next? So this chapter 7. And by reading like this in this book, I can remember the whole story well. So, good reading. The 2 women and a small boy stood absolutely still on the grass underneath the tree, gazing up at this extraordinary fruit. James' little face was glowing with excitement. His eyes were as big and bright as 2 stars. I could see the peach swelling larger and larger as clear as if it were a balloon being blown up. In half a minute it was the size of a melon. In another half minute it was twice as big again. Just look at it growing. And Spiker cried. Will it ever stop? And Sponge shouted, waving her fat arm and starting to dance around in circles. And now it was so big it looked like a enormous watercolored pumpkin dangling from the top of the tree. Get away from that tree trunk, you stupid boy! And Spiker yelled. The slightest shake, and I'm sure it will fall off. It might weigh 20 or 30 pounds at least. The branch that the fish was growing up on was beginning to bend over further and further because of the weight. Stand back! And the Sponge shouted, it's coming down. The branch is going to break. But the branch didn't break. It simply bent over more and more as the fish got heavier and heavier. And still it went on growing. In another minute, this mammoth fruit was as large and round and fat as Aunt Sponge herself, and probably just as heavy. It has to stop now, Aunt Spiker yelled. It can't go on forever. But it didn't stop. Soon it was the size of a small car, and reached halfway to the ground. Both sons were now hopping around and around the tree, clapping their hands and shouting all sorts of silly things in their excitement. Hallelujah! And Spiker shouted, what a fish, what a fish! Terrifico! And Sponge cried out, magnifico, splendifico! And what a meal! It's still growing. I know.
for James, he was so spellbound by the whole thing that he could only stand and stare and murmur quietly to himself, "Oh, isn't it beautiful? It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." "Shut up, you little crap," and Spiker snapped, happening to overhear him. "It's none of your business." "That's right," and Spongy declared. "It's got nothing to do with you. Whatever. Keep out of it." "Look," and Spiker shouted. "It's growing faster than ever now. It's speeding off. I see, Spiker. I do." Bigger and bigger grew the fish. Bigger and bigger and bigger. And at last, when it had become nearly as tall as a tree, that it was growing on as tall as wide. In fact, as a small house, the bottom part of it gently touched the ground, and there it rested. "It can't fall off now," and Spongy shouted. "It's stopped growing." And Spike cried, "No, it hasn't." "Yes, it has. It's slowing down, Spiker. It's slowing down, but it hasn't stopped yet. You watch it?" There was a pause. "It hasn't now. I believe you are right. Do you think it's safe to touch it?" "I don't know, so we'd better be careful." And Spongy and Spiker began walking slowly around the peach, inspecting it very cautiously from all sides. They were like a couple of hunters who had just shot an elephant and were not quite sure what it was dead or alive, and a massive round fruit towered and over them, so high that they looked like midgets from another world beside it. The skin of the peach was very beautiful, rich buttery yellow with patches of brilliant pink and red. And Sponge advanced cautiously and touched it with the tip of one finger. "It's ripe," she cried. "It's just perfect. Now, see here, Spiker, why don't we go and get us a shovel, hurry and dig out of the great big hunk of it, and pull you and me into it?" "No," and Spike said, "not yet." Why ever not?" "Because I say so. But I can't wait to eat some." And Spongy cried out. She was watering at the mouth now, and a thin trickle of spit was running down the side of her chin. "My dear Spongy," and Spiker said slowly, winking at her sister and smiling a slight thin little smile, "there's a file of money to be made out of this, if only we can handle it right. You wait and see." Spiker and Spiker thinking, "Wow, this giant fishy is awesome." Talking about chapter 7. The fish got grow and grow, so it became as big as a house, and so it dangled, and at last it lied on the ground. So when Spongy wanted to shovel to get some peach to eat, but Spike told her they could get money from the giant fish. Okay, so quite interesting story, and Roald Dahl's imagination is very wide. So chapter 8. Okay. Here it is, chapter 8. The news that a fish almost as big as a house had suddenly appeared in someone's garden, spread like wildfire across the
countryside. And the next day, a stream of people came scrambling up the steep hill to gaze upon this marvel. Pickles and Spongy and Aunt Spike called in carpenters and had them build a strong fence around the beach to save it from the crowd. And at the same time, these two crafty women stationed themselves at the front of the gate with a large bunch of tickets and started charging everyone for coming. Roll up, and Spike yelled. Only one sailing to see the giant fish? Half price for children under 6 weeks old. And Spongy shouted. One at a time, please. Don't push. You are all going to get in. Hey, Yost, come back there. You haven't paid. By lunchtime, the whole place was a seething mass of men, women, and children all whooshing and shoving to get a glimpse on this miraculous food. Helicopters were landing like wasps all over the hill, and out of them poured swarms of newspaper reporters, cameramen, and men from the television companies. It'll cost you double to bring in a camera, and Spiker shouted. All right, they answered. We don't care. And the money came rolling into the pockets of the two goody aunts. But while all this excitement was going on outside, poor James was forced to stay locked in his bedroom, peeping through the bars of his windows at the crowds below. The disgusting little brute will only get in everyone's waist if we let him so wander about, Aunt Spiker had said early that morning. Please, he had begged. I haven't met any other children for years and years, and there are going to be lots of them down there for me to play with. Perhaps I could help you with the tickets. Get it out. Aunt Spongy had snapped. Your Aunt Spike and I are about to become millionaires, and the last things we want is the likes of you messing things up, getting in the way. Later, when the evening of the first days came and the people had all gone home, the aunts unlocked James' door and ordered him to go outside and pick up all the banana skin and the orange peels and bits of the paper that crowd had left behind. Could I please have something to eat first? He asked. I haven't had a thing all day. No, they shouted, kicking out the door. We are too busy to make food. We are counting our money. But it's dark, cried James. Get out, they yelled, and stay out until you've cleaned up all the mess. The door slammed. The key turned in the lock. Oh, poor James. In chapter 8, and Spongy and Spiker made on money, lots of money. But they locked James while they were hosting villagers who wanted the giant fish. It got dark, and then they opened the door and let James clean up like bananas or orange peels and papers which people had left. James wanted to eat fish, but he was not allowed to eat fish. So, and then the horrible aunties locked the doors, leaving James outside. Terrible. Oh, poor James. Anyway, we'll go for chapter 9. Hungry and trembling.
James stood alone out in the open, wondering what to do. The night was all around him now, and high overhead a wild white moon was riding in the sky. There was not a sound, not a movement anywhere. Most people, and especially small children, are often quite scared of being out of doors alone in the moonlight. Everything is so deadly quiet, and the shadows are so long and black, and they keep turning into strange shapes that seem to move as you look at them, and the slightest little snap of a twig makes you jump. James felt exactly like that now. He stared straight ahead with large, frightened eyes, hardly daring to breathe. Not far away, in the middle of the garden, he could see the giant Fiji soaring above everything else. Surely it was even bigger tonight than ever before. And what a dazzling sight it was! The moonlight was shining and glinting on its great curving sides, turning them to crystal and silver. It looked like a tremendous silver bowl lying there in the glass, silent, mysterious, and wonderful. And then, all at once, little shivers of excitement started running over the skin of James' back. Something else, he told himself. Something stranger than ever this time. It's about to happen to me again soon. He was sure of it. He could feel it coming. He looked around him, wondering what on earth it was going to be. The garden lay soft and silver in the moonlight. The grass was wet with dew, and a million dewdrops were sparkling and twinkling like diamonds around his feet. And now suddenly the whole place, the whole garden seemed to be alive with magic, almost without knowing what he was doing, as though drawn by some powerful magnet. James suddenly Trotter started walking slowly toward a giant Fiji. He climbed over the fence that surrounded it and stood directly beneath it, staring up at its great bulging side. He put out a hand and touched it gently with the tip of one finger. It felt soft and warm and slightly furry, like the skin of a baby mouse. He moved a step closer and rubbed his cheeks lightly against the soft skin. And then suddenly, while he was doing this, he happened to notice that right beside him and below him, close to the ground, there was a hole in the side of the beach. Amazing. The hole might lead James to adventure, to get adventures. Interesting. Talking about chapter 9. James went out to clean up, and then he went to the giant fish, and then he felt something, and then it happened. There was a hole under the giant fish, and so maybe James went to adventure. Now, quite exciting, and go for chapter 10. What James going to do? It was quite a large hole, the sort of thing an animal about the size of a fox might have made. James knelt down in front of it and poked his head and shoulders inside. He crawled in. He kept on crawling. This isn't just a hole, he thought excitedly. It's a tunnel. The tunnel was damp and murky, and all around him there was the curious bittersweet smell of the fresh peach. The floor was soggy under his knees. The walls were wet and sticky, and peach juice was dripping from the ceiling. James opened his mouth and caught some of it on his tongue. It tasted delicious. He was crawling uphill now, as though the tunnel were leading straight toward the very center of the gigantic fruit. Every few seconds he paused and took a bite out of the wall. The fishy flesh was sweet and juicy and marvelously refreshing. He groaned for several more yards, and then suddenly, bang! The top of his head bumped into something extremely hard, blocking his way. He glanced up. In front of him there was a solid wall that seemed at first as though it were made of wood. He touched it with his finger. It suddenly felt like wood, except that it was very jagged and full of deep grooves. Good heaven, he said. I know what this is. I've come to the stone in the middle of the pitch. And then he noticed that there was a small door cut into the face of the pitch stone. He gave a push. It swung open. He crawled through it, and before he had time to glance up and see where he was, he heard a voice saying, "Look, who's here?" And another one said, "We've been waiting for you." James stopped and stared at the speakers, his face white with horror. He started to stand up, but his knees were shaking so much he had to sit down again on the floor. He glanced behind him, thinking he could bolt back into the tunnel the way he had come. But the doorway had disappeared. There was now only a solid brown wall behind him. What a adventurous and also very, very imaginative. How could James crawl into the pitch and met the stone in the core in which there was seed? Good story.